Was supposed to be just another morning. The sun crawled over maple and pine, casting warm light on the cracked sidewalks of a town too small for secrets, yet blind to legends. The kind of place where no one looked twice at an old man in a rusted truck. That morning, Harold Briggs, 82, denim and flannel, cap embroidered with U.S. Army Special Forces, was heading home from the hardware store. In the bed of his battered '68 Chevy were lengths of wood, bags of screws, a tool belt and a folded list written in clean block letters. Another ramp for another neighbor, free of charge, just like always. A block from home, red and blue lights. Slashed across the road behind him. Harold slowed, signaled, pulled over. He kept both hands on the wheel. No sudden moves, no protest, just stillness. 2 patrol officers approached. Young, confident, unaware. License, registration, or just some. Good excuses, old man, Officer Keller said, circling the truck with a smirk. His partner, Officer Dunn, chuckled. No plates, no tags. You sure this thing even runs? Probably stolen. Harold said nothing. He handed over his ID, worn, creased at the corners. It said, Harold Briggs. It didn't say what it meant. Retired, huh? Dunn squinted. From what? Carpentry? Class? They pulled him out of the cab, searched him, made him sit on the curb like he was some vagrant with a story no one cared to hear. Wallet, keys, a weathered photo, a notebook filled with names. What's this? Some kind of code? Dunn asked. Flipping through it carelessly. Names of men I served with, Harold replied, his voice calm, even. The officer tossed it back like it meant nothing. They inspected the truck, rusted bolts, old army decals faded by years of sun, dents that weren't from careless driving, but shrapnel, scrapes that came not from garages but from jungle brush in places maps didn't admit existed. What's in the back? Keller asked, tapping the tailgate. Materials for a wheelchair ramp, Harold answered. Mrs. Clancy, 3 houses down. The officers laughed. Sure it is. Maybe you're bootlegging moonshine in there too, huh? Still, Harold said nothing more. His silence wasn't fear, it was practice. He'd survived ambushes, carried men through firefights, built field hospitals under mortar fire. He wasn't about to flinch now, but the cameras rolled. A teenager snapped a selfie. Grandpa's in trouble. Uploaded it, hashtags followed, people passed by. No one stepped in, just another stop. Just another old man. Except he wasn't. Because in Harold's glove box was a folded certificate bearing a Bronze Star. In his coat pocket, a retirement letter signed by the Army Chief of Staff. In his heart, decades of service, and a patience sharper than any weapon. He stared into the distance, not because he was lost, but because he remembered, and because somewhere in that moment, someone else did too. Across town, Mike Henderson, gas station clerk, former infantry, set down his coffee and picked up the phone. General Phillips? You're not going to believe who they've got sitting on the curb. The call came through as General Thomas Phillips was reviewing training protocols with his senior staff. He didn't recognize the number. He almost didn't answer. But something made him swipe. Sir, this is Mike Henderson, Riverside Gas Station. You probably don't remember me, but listen, they've got Sergeant Major Briggs sitting on the curb like some suspect. A pause. Harold Briggs? The general stood up. Within 60 seconds, everything in his schedule was cleared. Within 10 minutes, he was in a black SUV with tinted windows flanked by aides. Within an hour, he turned the corner of Maple and Pine, and the air shifted. The SUV didn't roll up slow. It arrived like it had somewhere to be. Government plates, a military driver. The kind of arrival that made people pause their coffee and lower their phones. 2 patrol officers stiffened as the door opened. Out stepped General Phillips. 4 stars glinting in the Kansas sun, eyes focused. No words wasted. Which of you stopped this man? Keller looked confused. Dunn fumbled his radio. The crowd began to grow. Phillips ignored the murmurs. He walked straight to Harold, who had not moved from the curb. Permission to help. You up, Sergeant Major? Harold, still calm, nodded once. Permission granted. The general turned to the officers. You just disrespected the man who taught me how to lead. Silence. Then whispers. Then phones lifted again. The general wasn't done. He pointed to the truck. That vehicle, it's part of Army history, just like he is. He told them what the two officers never asked. About Harold's covert missions. About his post-9/11 training of special forces. About the men who survived because of his survival techniques. About the ramps he built. The blood he donated. The decades of quiet service. You thought he was nobody. Because he looked like nobody. Officer Dunn's face had gone pale. Officer Keller looked down. But General Phillips offered no shouting. No fury, just the kind of quiet that made the world listen. You never know who you're stopping, Harold finally spoke. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to the next old man. Before you assume he's nothing. And with that, a town awoke. More than just to shame or story. But to something deeper. To the legacy of service without spotlight. To the lesson that real strength doesn't need to raise its voice. And that sometimes, it only takes 6 words to turn a moment into a movement. It started with one voice. That's Harold Briggs. He built my father's wheelchair ramp, didn't take a dime. Then another. He brings groceries to the senior center every week. Taught my son's scout troop survival skills. Soon the crowd was 30 people deep. Cameras pointed. Hands shaded foreheads. Whispers turned to reverent silence as more stories spilled into the open. No longer rumors. Now truth. Backed by grateful neighbors. By lives made better, not by government programs or grand gestures, but by one old man in a rusted truck who asked for nothing in return. The general listened, nodding with each account, and then he said, loud enough for every camera to catch, Sergeant Major Briggs never stopped. Serving. Officer Keller swallowed hard. Dunn shifted his weight. The general turned to them once more. His voice was steel. This is what happens when you replace respect with assumption. When protocol becomes a hammer instead of a compass. He handed Keller a folder. Briggs's unclassified service record. Missions, honors, names. Every page heavy. With weight not measured in ink, but sacrifice. Keller took it like a man realizing he'd been blind. Briggs didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The crowd had already seen enough. A woman in scrubs stepped forward. Mr. Briggs donated blood every month for 30 years. Never missed one. A retired mailman nodded. I always left extra stamps for him. Didn't know why. Just felt right. The SUV driver stood at attention, still beside the open door as the general faced the town. This truck once carried medical supplies through 4 feet of water during Hurricane Andrew, he said, because he heard someone needed help. So he drove. No orders, no medals. Just Harold being Harold. The silence was no longer awkward. It was holy. Harold's voice broke it low and gravelly. You want to make it right? Don't salute me. Don't tweet about it. Just remember the next time you see someone like me, ask, don't assume. He turned to Keller. And make sure the rookies. Coming up after you? They read that file, every page. And with that, the man they tried to dismiss stood taller than any badge, and the town, finally, stood with him. What started as a traffic stop had become something else entirely. By nightfall, the footage had already gone viral. Local news picked it up first, but it didn't stop there. General defends elderly vet from unjust police treatment, read the headlines. By the end of the week, it was national. The mayor declared June 4th Harold Briggs Day. But Harold didn't want parades. He didn't want ceremonies. He wanted ramps. The donations poured in, over $247,000 in the first week alone. Harold directed every penny toward building accessibility ramps for disabled veterans. They called it the Briggs Initiative. Within a month, it had a waiting list 300 names long. A bronze plaque went up at the corner of Maple and Pine. Not a memorial, but a reminder. A message etched into metal. Not every uniform comes with a spotlight, but every act of service leaves a legacy. And Harold? He kept driving that same old truck, kept showing up to fix things, kept quietly making the town a little more whole. People stepped aside now, not out of pity, out of respect. Weeks later, Officer Keller knocked on Harold's door. Sorry, sir. Truly. Harold poured him coffee. You learn from it, he said, or someone else pays next time. From that day forward, every new recruit at the sheriff's department read Harold's file before receiving their badge. And every time that old truck rattled down Main Street, cruisers didn't pull it over. They pulled over to salute. 3 months later, General Phillips returned to town. No SUV, no uniform. Just jeans, boots, and a bottle of good whiskey. He and Harold sat on the porch watching dusk settle. You turned it around, the general said. Harold shook his head. They turned it. I just stayed still long enough for them to see. The truck still rattled down Main Street, still delivered lumber, still carried a flag when a veteran passed. But now, cruisers pulled aside, lights off. Officers standing at attention. Not to stop it, to salute. And at the academy, every rookie reads a laminated card. Respect comes first, because you never know who you're stopping.